The Philadelphia Flyers had one of the busiest 2025 NHL draft classes this season, and I think they came out with quite a lot of players that I think will be a great fit for the Philadelphia Flyers of the future. Over the last few years, they've drafted a nice combination of skill and physicality and some size and some guys that maybe lack some size, and I think this year was really no different, but certainly leaned a little more in the physical direction. But starting things off at 6th overall, they drafted Porter Martone. Now, Martone is one of my favorite players that I've seen in all my years of doing this, but I think a lot of that has to do with the fact that I've been watching him since he was 16, playing AAA hockey here in Toronto. Really talented, well-rounded player with a lot of size, but a really good sense of skill, excellent playmaking vision where he executes his ideas very quickly and very accurately. He's a pretty good finisher as well. I'd love to see him get to the net a little bit more than he already does. He's more of a mid-range threat right now, but he is a physical player, but it doesn't really come out as often as you might think, judging by the reputation that he has. But he does bring it out when necessary, and I do think that as his skating ability improves over the next few years, I think that these things should happen a little bit more and a little bit more quickly, which are definitely areas that I would love to see more out of Martone in the future. I think at the very least, you're getting a very well-rounded offensive playmaking winger that can maybe play on your first line, but a really good second line, well-rounded offensive player that brings a lot to the game and is just a great person to have in the dressing room. He was made a captain at 17 years old for Brampton this year for a reason, and after having met him, you can definitely tell that he exudes a level of leadership, or at least a level of confidence that you definitely want to rally around, and I think that there's value in that too. So as another major piece to work with and build around with guys like Matvei Michkov already on the team, a recent acquisition in Trevor Zegras, there's plenty of skill and offensive ability here for the Philadelphia Flyers, and the rest of the draft class rounds things out quite nicely as well, so let's move on. So the Philadelphia Flyers traded picks 22 and 31 to the Pittsburgh Penguins in order to draft 12th overall this year. There might be people who aren't surprised by this, but even I was underestimating just how high Jack Nesbbit could go in this draft, because here he is at 12th overall. I've watched Jack Nesbbit quite a bit this year because I kept going back wondering if there's something I am missing. This is a similar argument to drafting a guy like Roger McQueen, where it's not there right now, but 5, 6, 7 years from now, maybe there's something that is really worth taking here. He is a very big player. He is a relatively physical player. He's got a bit of skill to him, a pretty good finishing ability. But when watching him and tracking the data, there was nothing that really stuck out as a really high-end NHL prospect. But the argument of he's tall and thin, and he was an awful skater 2 years ago, and he's a bad skater now, so maybe that will improve over the next 5 to 7 years. If that's what you believe, I can't disagree. I personally think there were a number of directions I would have rather gone here, but I'm happy to be wrong looking back on this. And look, if he's a really good third line center for Philadelphia in the future, then awesome. I think that that's a valuable role for a guy to have, but I just can't help but feel like, especially trading up for this draft pick, you could have done a lot better. For example, at 22nd, Pittsburgh went ahead and drafted a guy who I would have been more than happy to add at this pick in Bill Zonon, who is a also very physical but a higher pace, I would say smarter and higher skill offensive player that plays up the middle of the ice as well and has some good defensive upside. But honestly, with Nesbbit, I never really saw a top 15 pick. I never saw a player that I would trade up for at this point, but if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. There is some stuff in his game that is a positive, but this is not the direction I would have gone at 12. At 36th overall, they drafted a player I had ranked at 38th in Carter Amico. Now, Carter Amico was a player that I didn't really see a ton of in terms of upside at the beginning of the season, and his injury that knocked him out for the rest of the season obviously withheld the ability to really get a good read on him. But as the year wore down, I went back and watched a couple of games that he had played before his injury, including one at the NCAA level, and in the context of all of the defensemen in this year's draft, Amico stood out as a very good defensive player first. I think there's a really intriguing package of talents to build on here. It's interesting to see this player because he is a big kid, but he is a very mobile defensive player as well. This is a guy who I think just plays a really well-rounded and solid defensive style of play, and I saw him throw some of the bigger hits I've seen a defenseman throw this year, so there's something in that as well. I don't have huge expectations for Carter Amico, but I think this is a really good range to pick him. I had him ranked around here. I don't know about overall upside with this pick, but I don't really care because I think he's really solid in the areas that matter to play a role that matters in the NHL. Is he going to be a top pair guy for Philadelphia Philadelphia in 5 to 7 years. Sure, if you put him with the right player, anyone could be a top pair defenseman, but more than likely maybe a second, third pair guy with a really good physical but strong defensive style of play. I think there could be something here with Amico, and after watching him towards the end of the year, there was definitely some stuff that stuck out in the sea of defensemen that I found a little bit underwhelming this year that put Amico closer to the top for me. At 73rd overall, they took Jack Nesbbit. At 73rd nope. They had him at, okay. At 40th overall, they took Jack Mertag. Mertag was one of the last names ranked on my list this year because I just didn't see what he was now, and I feel like at the end of the day, there could be an interesting complementary offensive player here. He's got a bit of a physical edge, but I wouldn't say it was really a standout quality of his game. Small area playmaking, I would say, especially in the offensive zone, was a really, really strong point of his game. Just putting pucks between legs, finding ways to create little passing lanes through defenders, all those hard skill areas of the game, I think he performed decently well at. He's got a pretty good finishing ability as well. I just felt that outside of the offensive zone, Mertag didn't bring as much as I like to see out of players ranked in my top 50, but I get the logic here. He's a solid player, a solid pickup, and sure, I could see a nice complementary, more physical, edgy type player down the road, and he is very young for this draft class, so there is a bit of a longer developmental trajectory. At 48th overall, the Philadelphia Flyers selected one of my personal favorite players in this draft in Shane Venagi. Now, I had Shane Venagi pretty deep into my first round. I love this guy, and I'm so happy that the Philadelphia Flyers selected him. I was pretty sure that he was going to be really high on the list of a team like the Ottawa Senators, but the Philadelphia Flyers are a pretty good contender in that discussion. I just think Flyers fans are going to love this guy. I don't think he has a huge ceiling in his future, but the physical play in his game is one of the best in the entire draft. He's got some good hard skill to get through pressure, but off the puck, the guy is a monster. I saw him absolutely crush guys. I saw him chase guys down in the offensive zone, cause turnovers. There was a little bit of offense that came out a little bit. He didn't get a ton of ice time with Michigan State this year. I can only expect things to go up from here. Venagi, out of all of the players Philadelphia drafted, was the second highest one that they picked off of my list, and they got him in the middle of the second round, so for me, this is a great pickup. I think they did a really good job here with Venagi, and I think that he's exactly what the Flyers are all about, what Flyers fans are looking for, and I think he offsets what they've got in the stable really well. They then went ahead and drafted Matthew Gard. It was a little teeny bit higher than I had him ranked, but I get the logic here. Gard is a player who gets up and down the ice pretty well in a straight line. He's a pretty good up and down forward. He can play center if you need him to, and he's got some skill to go along with it that I saw pop off a couple of times here and there. This is just a guy where if you give him the puck in the neutral zone on the rush, he can really put defensemen on their heels and try to drive pucks into the slot. The issue with Gard for me was just that the diversity of his game beyond that was a little bit limited, but if you can pull those kinds of things off at the NHL level and also play a physical brand of hockey, close gaps, and cause turnovers in the offensive zone, you're going to be fine. I think there is a bit of a floor to Gard that could lead him to an NHL job. I had him ranked in my top 2 rounds. This makes sense to me. Maybe not the guy I would have drafted here, but again, if you're the Flyers, I see the logic. Jumping forward to 132nd, the Philadelphia Flyers drafted Max Westergard. Westergard, I felt, was one of the more impressive players coming out of Finland this year. He played this season in Sweden. I saw him quite a lot. He worked his way up onto Frölunda's men's team this year, and I think he brings a really intriguing long-term upside bet style of play that I think has very little in the way of a floor, but the ceiling is certainly really strong. Westergard is an extremely confident one-on-one skill player. He will try to attack anyone with his skill and pace of play. It doesn't matter. I saw him do it even at the SHL level. The problem with Westergard is that he is a little bit undersized and does need to be a bit stronger on his feet under those high-pressure scenarios, and the bigger issue for me is that while he's a pretty explosive skater and his first couple of steps are pretty quick, he kind of stops gaining speed after that point, so his puck touches, I think, will need to be very quick, very calculated, and I just didn't see a whole lot of that at this age. But again, this is a player who's almost eligible for next year's draft, At this point in the draft, if his name came up as an option, I would take it. I had him ranked higher than Matthew Guard. I had him ranked higher than Jack Mertag. I didn't even have Jack Nesbbit ranked. Max Westergard, I think, brings some interesting tools to the game that maybe in the long term certainly could turn into something. I'm not sure exactly what, outside of maybe a good sort of complementary skilled offensive winger, and I think the road to get there is pretty long, but I think there is a good foundational level of skill there that you can build on. At 157th, they drafted Lwick, and I saw a little bit of Lwick this year, and he never really moved the needle for me much. He's big, and I think it's at this point in the draft where you see a lot of these sort of bigger, safer, more defensively responsible players available, and if he becomes a player, it's a testament to their development program. I didn't see a whole lot there where I went, wow, this is a really good defense-first NHL defenseman one day, but he does have the things that teams are looking for, so maybe he'll get there. Closing out their draft class, they took Nathan Quinn at 164th, and this surprised me a little bit. I saw Quinn a few times this season and was really impressed with his sort of small area skill and passing ability. He times things really, really well, moving the puck, especially around the offensive zone. He was part of a really successful line in the QMJHL this year, and I think he was a big part of why they had quite a lot of success there. Again, very smart, very well-timed passer, really solid playmaking center who I think is one of these players that might just not have enough to crack and stay in the NHL one day, but at this point in the draft, I think it's a perfectly acceptable bet to make. There's some stuff there that you can definitely work on with regards to his hockey sense and passing ability, so we'll see where it goes from here, but I mean, at 164th, you can't really complain too much about players, and I'm not going to complain about Nathan Quinn too much in this spot. So for the Philadelphia Flyers, I'm going to be giving them a 2C. I think that the Philadelphia Flyers probably could have aimed a little bit higher with a few of these draft picks. Porter Martone and James Haggins, I'm not going to nitpick that one. Those two were in the same tier for me. Jack Nesbitt at 12, I mean, look, at this point, I kind of hope that I'm incorrect on him because taking him at 12 is one of the biggest surprise draft picks for me in the entire draft. I just have seen him so much and I just don't really get it outside of who knows what he could be. And at that point, whatever, we'll see. But other than that, I think they overall definitely did a good job drafting players that I think culturally really fit what they're trying to do. Amico, Mertag, Venagi, Guard, Lwick, all of these players really seem to strike me as guys that should thrive in the developmental culture that Philadelphia wants to cultivate. Max Westergard is a great swing on skill. He could be an SHL player next season, and he may very well have been a draft eligible player for next year if he was just born a little bit later. So I do think that this is a nice upside bet here, and definitely one I would have been behind. And Nathan Quinn, sure, I see some stuff there that I've liked, and with the last pick in the draft, totally acceptable. So there is a wide breadth of potential outcomes for me with these guys. Some guys may be a little more limited, but that still could work in the NHL. Some guys have some good upside, but the chance of getting there is maybe a little bit questionable. And overall, I think I would have done things a little bit differently here, but trying to put myself in the shoes of the Philadelphia Flyers and what they're trying to be, yeah, I get where they're coming from, even if I might have gone a different direction. A very interesting draft class. I'll be very curious to see how things go for them in the future, and this could turn out really well for them as a really strong, solid group of players that definitely could round out your roster. And with that, we're going to call it. If you liked the video, definitely like and subscribe. If you really liked it, definitely consider a subscription over at Scouching.ca, where you can get access to all kinds of fun data tools on our Discord server and plenty of other fun stuff that you're just not going to find anywhere else on the internet. So check that out at Scouching.ca. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.